everybody, and welcome back to the Zodcast. This is going to be episode number 15, and it's also January 1st, 2021. So happy New Year's, everybody. Hope you have a good year ahead, and hopefully it's definitely better than the last year. I think we can all probably say that to some extent. The first, as you probably noticed, I have a little bit of a different intro, and definitely a shout out to my 10-year-old daughter who created that, did it all on her own, found all the images, did the sound, did the subscribe button, and all that. So she's much better at this stuff than I am. And she also turned me on to this new app that I'm using. I think it's called Kine Master, Kine Master. You see the logo up there. I'll probably subscribe to it. I think you pay like $10 a month and you can get rid of that logo and it gives you more features. But I think I definitely like this a little better than the app I was using to make the other uploads. But anyway, thanks to her for doing that. I think it looks great. Really proud of you for getting that done, and I know she will like hearing this when I play it back. So without further ado, some quick mailbag stuff. I wanted to read a quick one that comes in from Anna Morris, and Anna's been a good faithful member of the Zod Squad for some time, and she always has some really interesting takes on everything. And she wrote, I thought of a simple explanation to which to illustrate some of what I said in a longer comment a couple days ago. I still think the 340 has other messages, maybe easy to find mostly in the plain text. For instance, the top line starts HER, she put that in all caps. Underneath is +B. Some have seen this as Herb, then they made Cain in subsequent letters. As I understand it, part of the actual solution is to move ahead a couple of characters and drop down a line. That is how Herb can be made. There are other things that do similar or even the same. I am not saying Zodiac included Herb, Cain, or other kind of Herb in the overall message, but I think there may be instructions to solve the cipher and maybe some other short messages. Anyone's attention can be caught by HER+B, and she put HER in all caps. So that's interesting. I mean, there could be something there. Dave Aranchek, if you're listening, maybe you can weigh in on that. And she posted that in the last video, of course, but I'd love to hear his take on it, of course. So that's always very interesting. And Anna also corrected me on my mispronunciation of the Mad Woman play. I won't even say the third word. She definitely gave me the French pronunciation of that play that Paul Avery was in while he was at Bakersfield College. And I, of course, butchered it, and she knew how to pronounce it right. I don't have it in front of me, but I remember it definitely made sense. So thank you for that. Also, shout out to Fandavan. You are a big fan, of course, and I really appreciate you. Lots of good questions coming from him, and we had a good little back and forth on there that y'all can go read for sure. He's rewatching. His name was Arthur Lee Allen again, and that started it all for me. That documentary started it all, and I know some lady asked me to do a recap of all my work in a video, and I told her I would, but that's going to be pretty lengthy. What I would do and what I will do is put a link to the very first video I ever uploaded to YouTube, which says everything kind of in a nutshell of where I started with this whole thing with Zodiac. And it was with that video called His Name Was Arthur Lee Allen. So I will post that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the basics of it are, for anybody who's new, I know a lot of new people are coming into the Zodiac case, mainly because of the three gentlemen that solved the 340 cipher, got a lot of attention. Of course, David just mentioned was one of those three. With a couple of us counterparts solved that cipher, which is great because it made so much news and it just breathed new life into this case, and it definitely inspired me to keep digging in and try to find out even more new things about this case and my particular person of interest. And if you are new to this channel and new to the case, this is, of course, called the Zodcast. It's about the Zodiac Killer and that aforementioned person of interest, which is Donald Lee Cheney. And if you're familiar with Robert Graysmith's book, Zodiac, or the David Fincher film, also called Zodiac, it is about a person named Arthur Lee Allen and how he is potentially the Zodiac Killer. Well, Donald Lee Cheney was Arthur Lee Allen's friend who brought Arthur Lee Allen forward as a suspect in the summer of 1971. It was actually July of 1971. And Don came forward with this story saying, hey, my friend told me on New Year's Day 1969 that he was going to become a killer and call himself the Zodiac, and he was going to go scope out lovers' lanes, and he liked this book called The Most Dangerous Game, and all this stuff, all this really compelling stuff that would lead you to believe him. But of course, Don over the years kept changing his story, kept changing his facts, and began to bring a lot of attention onto himself. And what first inspired me was the film His Name Was Arthur Lee Allen, which we talk about a lot on this channel, where Don Cheney said that he used to lick Arthur Lee Allen stamps for him. And that obviously came about because Don Cheney knew that they were going to DNA test one of the letters that was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle that wound up in the hands of the San Francisco Police Department, and they were checking for DNA from beneath the stamp. So I think the only reason Donald Cheney ever said that was because he was genuinely worried about his DNA showing up. And it goes on further from there, and I'll explain more of that later. But that's just the genesis of this. It's a focus on Don Cheney, who brought forward Arthur Lee Allen as a suspect. And till this day, Arthur Lee Allen remains the top suspect in the Zodiac case. Well, why? There's so many things that point against him. The reason is not just because of the Fincher film and the Grace Smith book, but because a lot of that evidence against Allen is so compelling. Well, enter Don Cheney, you have tons of great circumstantial evidence on Don Cheney, and you get to add Arthur Lee Allen's good circumstantial evidence for the super suspect, if you want to call it that. So anyway, not to digress too much because I'll get into some more of that later, but I also wanted to give a shout out to Matthew McKinnon for being the first person to solve the difficult cipher that I put up on the last Zodcast. Of course, that was one of the ciphers that was published in the Bakersfield, California newspaper in the early 50s, and I believe those ciphers inspired a particular individual that grew up in Bakersfield, as you all know. And Matt was the first one to email me with the solve, and it says, I'll just read his email. It says, first he gives the solution to that cipher. It was, some of you were wanting a really difficult cryptogram, weren't you? ? Well, how do you like this one? ? And then Matthew writes, the key was in the instructions stating that 7 of the letters were not in the cipher. Those 7 letters were difficult, D-I-F-C-O-L-T, because the word difficult was already given. From there, it was a simple substitution cipher. Thanks, Matthew. You were the first, and you are the winner. And also, who else did? The Invisible Man came up with the solve, and Monty as well. I think somebody else did. Sorry if I'm forgetting somebody there. But isn't that interesting? It looks like something that would definitely influence the Zodiac. Some of you were wanting a really difficult cryptogram, weren't you? It's just kind of that style. And of course, that's from Earl Price, not the Zodiac. And I'm pretty sure Earl Price was not the Zodiac. But rest assured, if Don Cheney was the Zodiac Killer, he was extremely aware of what was in his local paper, the Bakersfield Californian, and he was already practicing as a mechanical engineer even before he went into the Air Force, because he's listed as a mechanical engineer when he's still living at home at 1308 M Street in Bakersfield. So guess who sold drafting supplies and stuff that a mechanical engineer could use? You got it. Earl Price did. And it was literally less than a 5-minute walk from Don's house at 1308 M Street. Trust me, he was well aware of Earl Price personally, and Earl Price's ciphers, who gave away $10 prizes for the winners of solving the ciphers. Would I like a list of all the winners in the history of Earl Price's ciphers? You bet I would. Wow, I'd walk across hot coals all the way from Texas to Bakersfield to get that, because I guarantee you somebody's name is on that list. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting cipher and a great solve, and thanks, Matthew, for being the first to get that in. And now moving on, I saw this post on Reddit, which is what I affectionately refer to the website Reddit as, but there's occasionally something on there of value. And I saw this, and it reads, why hasn't Don Cheney been under more of an investigation? ? Are there any pictures of Don around the times of the killings ? If he put on some glasses and were thinner, I could see how he might look like the drawings. The advanced age drawing gives him a very similar mouth to the recent pictures of an aging Don Cheney. What do you think? Well, there's the picture I think he's talking about that was on Reddit. It wasn't accompanied with it. And there is it compared to a picture I have of Don Cheney from 1965. So, pretty close. Don did wear glasses, of course. So, it looks like Don stopped wearing glasses at some point in probably the early 1970s. I don't know for sure. I'd love to have a picture of Don closer to the killings like the end of 68, obviously 1969, but very lucky to find the ones I did. That wasn't easy to get. And so just thought that was interesting. And that definitely wasn't me posting that. It was somebody else. But he's pretty close, you know. But somebody's always going to say, well, he doesn't look as much like it like Ross Sullivan. Well, yeah, well, Ross Sullivan was said to probably not even be driving a car at the time of the murders. And I'm pretty sure the Zodiac didn't walk to Lake Berryessa. So there's that. But, you know, Don's pretty close, so just wanted to put that up real quick because I did see that on Reddit. And someone else asked me, you know, if I saw some other words or letters actually that were similar from the writing sample we have of Don Cheney that, of course, came from the letter he sent to Tom Voight compared to some of the Zodiac's writing. And I did, you know, recently I was kind of looking at that again. And I noticed the Zodiac's A's compared to Don's A's. Of course, lowercase letter A, and you see where in this sample I have up on the screen that Don never closes the loop on his A, and the Zodiac often did not close the loop on his A, and it also has that little tail that comes out. And if you look at the little tail coming off those lowercase A's, it looks like it kind of makes an E. You know, it loops and then makes the little turn up. I mean, those are very similar in my opinion. And of course, you have to do the caveat of I am no handwriting expert, but I don't know how much you have to really do to be qualified as one. But to the naked eye, looks kind of strange to me. But here's another one. Again, Zodiac. There's one of his A's and coming down, and then there's one of Cheney's A's, and they're never closed. And a few of these, like I've noticed in the Zodiac's writing, it looks like he tries to fix that in some areas. Like here's a letter A that this is Zodiac, and looks like, you know, the loop didn't close, and he took his pen and made it close. You can see those heavier dots, and then kind of looks like it just drew a line to close out that top, you know, to make the loop on the A. So I thought that was interesting. Definitely go compare that stuff for yourself, so you can be the ultimate judge. I did get an email yesterday from someone named Mark, and he was asking me if I thought that Mike Michaud knew more than he was stating that he knew, and he was kind of basing that on the old Geraldo show where Darlene Ferrin's sister Pam Huckabee was on there. I think that's the one where they show Pam going up to Michaud's house and trying to get him to talk, and of course Michaud really didn't want to talk about it and all that kind of thing. I'm sure a lot of you remember that show from back in the Geraldo days, but obviously Mark's fairly new to the case. He said he got into it from the Fincher film because he was a big Fincher fan, but I can tell you if that Pam Huckabee and her statements are about as reliable as a 72 Pinto with a rebuilt transmission. I mean, she's just not reliable. She's come out and said about 18 different people were the Zodiac Killer. I know I'm being a little facetious there, but quite a high number. She's completely unreliable. We've talked about that before. It's unfortunate, but it's true. I think Darlene Ferrin's other sister is Linda. She's not a whole lot better. They just come out with different things every time they interviewed them. And still, some of these Zodiac researchers glom on to people like Pam Huckabee and try to friend her on Facebook, and she probably checks it once every 3 years. It's just kind of, you know, it goes nowhere. You're not going to get anything out of Pam Huckabee, unfortunately. She's just not a good witness. But as far as Michaud goes, he even states here in this article I'm showing, and I'll read this part real quick and it'll zoom in on it. Michaud stressed that his description of the onslaught was not positive in his mind, but was more impressional than exact. He pointed out he was suffering from the critical wounds most of the time. So that, you know, shows you right there, even Michaud wasn't really confident in his original descriptions that he gave at the time. So the descriptions he gives later on are probably far worse. So when he ID'd Arthur Lee Allen, I've said this before, that was from George Bauer, who was the detective that had the Zodiac case last. And he really was leading Michaud to say, is this the guy? Is this the guy? Because, like I said, Bauer really wanted to be the guy that solved the Zodiac case. Of course, Arthur Lee Allen died before Bauer could make his big move in trying to get Arthur Lee Allen arrested for the crimes. But he was leading him. You can see that when Donald Falk talks about George Bauer interviewing him and how he was trying to get him to pick Arthur Lee Allen out. And that's when Officer Falk, who was, of course, the person that saw the Zodiac at the Presidio after the Paul Stein murder, said that when he saw a picture of Allen, he said the guy I saw was not near that heavy as Arthur Lee Allen. So, unfortunately, Michaud Just not a good witness. At the time, he had a flashlight in his face, and then later on, he had a lot of drug and alcohol problems. Long rap sheet. I've pulled up personally Mike Mageau's rap sheet, and it's unfortunate, but it's really lengthy. A lot of credit card fraud, stuff like that. I mean, the guy's had a really rough life. I mean, I'm not blaming him. He was attacked and almost killed. It's great that he survived it, but just not a good witness. And I don't think he knows anything more. I really don't. I think the whole Darlene Ferrin thing is just a rat hole. This case can take you down, and it's really unproductive. People still go through all this Jim Phillips Crabtree nonsense. I mean, none of those guys were the Zodiac. I'm sorry, they weren't. It's a total red herring to go down that rat hole just because she dated a lot of people, and I don't think that was a setup. I just don't. I mean, it's a rat hole that will cause people to never get to the truth in this case. So it's unfortunate, but that's what it is. And that picture on the screen is, of course, of Mike Mageau from that Geraldo interview. I think it was, or one of those shows. It was in the late 80s. I think Mageau was like in its early 40s or something like that. So just wanted to point that out so you didn't think that was a photo of Tom Selleck with a wicked hangover. And now I want to talk a little bit more about Michael Cole's new 3-book series called Zodiac Revisited, and pick up on some points there. I did buy the 3rd book in the series and already read it, and it was excellent. I highly recommend these books. I'll probably go back and get 1 and 2, but I kind of jumped to number 3 because I already knew the case, and I knew he'd kind of do a wrap up on the 3rd book, and he did, and kind of gave his outline of who he thought the Zodiac would be. He doesn't name any suspect in this book and this whole series at all, but I wanted to see what his profile of the Zodiac would be, and when you read it, and you keep Don Cheney in mind, and of course I'm going to do that. You know, why wouldn't I? But when I read how he thinks the Zodiac would be, and Cole's a really smart guy. He's an engineer at Intel, very analytical, and he's got a brilliant theory of, tying all this stuff in that the Zodiac was trying to do. But when you read this summation, you would definitely believe that it sounds a lot like Don Cheney, and I'll go over some of that. So one thing Cole starts in, you might have put it in all 3 of the books, but I noticed it in the 3rd, is he puts this quote up, and it says, "Circumstantial evidence is not only sufficient, but may also be more certain, satisfying, and persuasive than direct evidence." And that's from the U.S. Supreme Court, Rogers v. Missouri Pacific Railroad Company, 1957. But obviously he's talking about circumstantial evidence, which is that's all anybody has in the Zodiac case. There is no real physical evidence tying any of the known suspects or the unknown suspect. And for the record, Michael Cole, I think, says in the book, he doesn't believe that any of the known suspects are the Zodiac. I think he still thinks the Zodiac's out there somewhere, but maybe he's never taken a hard look at Donald Lee Cheney, because what he describes in book 3 of how the things that the Zodiac would have to know and the knowledge he'd have to have so line up with Don Cheney that the missing suspect that you haven't heard of yet would do a lot of catching up to get anywhere near Don Cheney. And remember, Don Cheney's the one that brought forward Arthur Lee Allen, who's still the lead suspect in this case. So Michael Cole needs to take a pretty good look at my stuff if he hasn't already, because I will say that he talks about, one thing that Cole does, he thinks that all the non-canonical crimes are the Zodiac. That's Donna Lass, that's Sherry Jo Bates, that's the Gaviota Beach murders, of course, Dominguez and Edwards, the victims there. And he does it all by tying it in, and he thinks what the Zodiac was doing, and I'm not giving anything away here, and I definitely recommend these books. But as you can see on his cover, he thinks the Zodiac was lining up the kill sites by their radians and the radius that it fell in, and if it could fall in. And if you look at the cover of the book that I'm showing, if the radius lined up, and I'm not a math guy, remember that, or a Cipher guy, I've always stated that. I'm a literature background person, but anyway, if the kill site lined up with a certain quadrant by radian, it would either have to be a kill by knife or by fire or by rope, and that's, we think, is based on the Tim Holt Wheel of Death that was Tahoe 27's find. And I'll show that again later. But anyway, this is, Cole's main theory is the Zodiac was doing this masterwork by lining up, along the radian where this kill site would be. And if it fell into the knife category, he'd have to do it by knife, or if it was by gun, like Presidio Heights with Paul Stein, that was that whatever in the Presidio lined up with this particular radian of 20 or however it goes along this compass, shown on his front book, is how the kill would be done. And it's really, really believable if you read the book. I think he's definitely onto something. He's probably right. But he again talks about this person, the Zodiac Killer, whoever it is, had knowledge of mathematics. It was a mathematics person, which we said that all along. So it's so many of the suspects don't even come near there. Larry Kane, are you kidding me? He never had any formal education in mathematics whatsoever. And Cole goes on to say, he goes, I don't think the Zodiac was a mathematical genius like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, where he was. That guy was a genius. He's insane, but he was a genius. He thinks that the Zodiac was highly intelligent and very mathematically inclined. Well, Don Cheney was a mechanical engineer that was also a pipe stress analyst when he was at Fluor, so obviously he was very handy with a radian. But he also, Cole talks about going back to Sherry Joe Bates, and he firmly believes that was the Zodiac murder and wrote the confession letter. And he thinks that when the confession letter start out with, I first pulled the middle wire from the distributor. And to Cole, that meant that the Zodiac clearly has significant, this is a quote from Cole from the book, he clearly had significant automotive knowledge. Well, gee, Don Cheney was the head of the Automobiles Engineering Society at Cal Poly Pomona, and I'll show that. That was in his wedding announcement. So there again, another tie. And even bigger than that, Michael Cole is pretty certain that, and I mentioned this before, that the Zodiac had celestial navigation knowledge and or training. I think he uses the word knowledge. Well, I can prove 100% that Don Cheney had celestial navigation training when he was training to be a pilot in Harlingen. Of course, I said this before, they called it their night cell. And I even have the amount of hours each cadet had to have in celestial navigation training. So here we go. We got Don, who's the head of the Automotive Engineer Society at Cal Poly Pomona. He's a mechanical engineer. And he also had celestial navigation training. And he was also could navigate racing sailboats. So, Michael Cole, I think you just gave me a good description of the Zodiac, and it sounds a lot like Donald Lee Cheney. And, throw on the boot that Don has all these other things going for him. And we'll go over those again. But it's just, he's totally lining up with him. So here on the screen real quick is the aforementioned blurb from Cheney's wedding announcement. It says, her husband is a graduate of Bakersfield High School and college. Following 2 years in the Air Force, he is attending Cal Poly as an engineering major. He is chairman of the Automobile Engineers Society and a member of Mechanical Engineering Club. So there you have it. There's the proof showing my work as a good math person would do. So there it is. I mean, how could you have this much in common with what these people think the Zodiac should have? So now on the screen I'm showing of course, the Tim Holt comic book that Tahoe 27 found that was referenced in the Zodiac's Halloween card, the Wheel of Death as they call it. They're showing Lady Red Mask who spins the wheel, and it could land on by gun, by knife, by rope, and she found that discovery. And what's funny is that she isn't even a firm believer that the Zodiac Halloween card is legitimately sent by the Zodiac Killer, which is kind of crazy to me. I'm definitely a believer that the Zodiac was not only influenced by Tim Holt, but also by Red Riders. Of course, you had that one symbol that looks like the Van Halen symbol from the Red Rider coloring book. And if you were growing up in Bakersfield, you had Red Rider everywhere. You had the Red Rider strip was in the Bakersfield, California newspaper. And also the big theater there, it was called the Fox Theater in Bakersfield. They would have cowboy and Indian movies shown, and they'd have Red Rider character come out in dressed as the character with his sidekick, the little Native American boy, Little Beaver. So no better place than to be exposed to Red Rider than Bakersfield. And Tim Holt as well, who I had previously mentioned, came to Bakersfield in 1949 to a Boy Scout awards meeting there at Bakersfield Junior College in the Harvey Auditorium, where Tim Holt showed up in full regalia in his RKO Studios outfit that he wore in the movies, and Don was a Boy Scout in 1949. What do you know? So there's the tie-in there. But I firmly believe that the Halloween card is legit. Obviously, it went to Secret Pal Paul Avery, who went to junior college with Don Cheney in Bakersfield. I mean, it doesn't just get to the point where this is critical mass on the circumstantial stuff. It really does. So going back to that quote that Michael Cole gives at the beginning of this book, that's where you're at. So, just to summarize, and I call this it just so happens, because let's just assume that neither Don Cheney or Arthur Lee Allen is the Zodiac Killer, or is a pair. Let's just say these two guys got together and wanted to jerk the cops around. Let's just assume that. And then we find out in early August of 1969, there is the debut of Zodiac letters that went to 3 different newspapers with 3 different parts of a cipher that were eventually solved by Donald Gene Hart, the 408 cipher, of course. So let's just assume that these guys are not the Zodiac and they're just going to screw the cops around. Or you can even assume that this is Don trying to get revenge against Arthur Lee Allen because he touched his daughter's bottom or for whatever reason. But neither of these guys are the Zodiac. So I would say it just so happens that Don Cheney has a mathematics background and was a mechanical engineer, specifically a pipe stress analyst, and understood what radians were. And we know the Zodiac used radians. Then let's also just say that Don also was in the military for 2 years. He was in the Air Force, had electronics training and celestial navigation training. And we can just say it's a coincidence that Don had above average intelligence. How do I know that? Well, he was a mechanical engineer, went to Cal Poly Pomona, pretty good school. He had a 2-year arts degree from Bakersfield College. He made the honor roll every year in high school at Bakersfield High School. So I think it's fairly safe to say that Don was of above average intelligence. Also, Don was an avid big game hunter. And then you get into the most dangerous game references. Of course, the 408 cipher referred to man is the most dangerous animal of all, which is a shout out to the book, The Most Dangerous Game, where man is being hunted and hunted by man instead of an animal because that's more of a challenge. And then you have to also add that Don Cheney was highly adept with knives, and that takes you to Lake Berryessa. If it doesn't take you to, of course, Sherry Jo Bates was murdered with a knife, but we know that the canonical crime was Lake Berryessa, and that was a knife attack. And Don was highly adept at knives. I know that for a fact. He preferred carbon steel blades. Also, Don was very advanced at sewing. He made custom leather sheaths for knives. He made a custom leather sheath for his son's Boy Scout hatchet, which was Don's, that he bequeathed to his son, and made a really nice custom leather sheath for that hatchet head that I have a photograph of. Don could make things out of leather like that. Well, what did Brian Hartnell see at Lake Berryessa? He said that the knife looked custom made. It had a sheath that Brian thought looked like it was made of wood, but it was probably actually made of leather. But he said the knife looked like it had a wrapped handle. And it's just, what are the odds that Don's adept with knives and sharpening his own knives using a whetstone? And also, what are the odds that Don matches the physical descriptions of the Zodiac seen by every witness that said he was either stocky, heavy set, or of course Donald Falcon Presidio, barrel chested? Just what are the odds that these guys are just going to take credit for some of this stuff and jerk the cops around, but yet Don has all these things in common? And also, so does Arthur Lee Allen, who misspelled words. Sister-in-law Karen Allen said he would often write Christmas, and she got a Christmas card from Arthur Lee Allen that had Christmas spelled with 2 S's, just like the Zodiac did. Isn't that odd? And then, it just goes on and on. There's even more. So how can these things not be connected? That's my whole point here, of how if these two guys had nothing to do with it, they're just 2 guys sitting around wanting to jerk the cops around, or Don wanting to get revenge on Arthur Lee Allen. It just so happens that when we do find out who the Zodiac is, and he's calling himself the Zodiac, he's using the cross circle logo, and also don't forget Arthur Lee Allen's watch that he got for Christmas of 1967, way before August 1969, when the killer comes out and says, I'm going to call myself Zodiac, and he starts using the cross circle logo, that Arthur Lee Allen did have that watch as early as Christmas of 1967, when his younger brother Ron also got the matching watch. So when you put all this together, what was existing before we knew who the Zodiac was between these 2 gentlemen, Donald Lee Cheney and Arthur Lee Allen? Well, you have the watch, you have Don's training in celestial navigation, you have Don's big game hunting and his adeption for certain knives, the carbon steel. You've got the fact that Don went to junior college with Paul Avery, where the Mikado was being done at the same time. I'm just telling you, the circumstantial evidence here between these 2 guys is mind-numbing, that they would not have actually been the killer, or at minimum the guys that were writing the ciphers and the letters. And you can get into these other arguments. Maybe there was a different writer of did the killings, and then someone was doing the correspondence. Of course, you run into problems because we know that some of the letters had pieces of Paul Stein's bloody shirt in them. So that gets really complicated when you start making that many assumptions. So you can assume that the letter writer and the killer were one and the same. So there we are. There you have it. That's all of it. So if you're new to it, I know that's a lot to take on, but that's quite a bit of information to download. And just to show I'm not just picking up on Michael Cole's material, you can also see a similar profile that's made in the book America's Jack the Ripper by Søren Korsgaard. And let me read a little bit of that book really quick. And I highly recommend this book as well, because I even quoted from it in my book, citing in on the Zodiac Killer. So this part in this book says, personality. The Zodiac was a pathological liar, manipulator, and narcissist. He was outwardly balanced yet internally raging. His resentment of couples symbolizes his jealousy and difficulties with the opposite sex. He hated the police intensely and was deliberately mysterious. He was probably not the type ever to forget a birthday or anniversary. He would exaggerate his accomplishments, and then he'd go on into a little bit more detail. And Korsgaard, like Michael Cole, he also believes the Zodiac is not one of the known suspects. He still thinks this guy's out there somewhere. Maybe he hasn't looked into Don a whole lot. But anyway, in Korsgaard's book, he lists some interests and capabilities that he believes the Zodiac would have. He says here, a movie aficionado, particularly attracted to violent ones. It says another one, enjoyed opera, cryptography, proficient sewer. There you go again, sewing. And I know somebody will say, well, lots of guys could sew. Really? And how many guys could sew, work on cars, knew celestial navigation, were adept with knives? See where I'm going with this? Sure, there was lots of guys that probably knew how to work on cars or disable a car in 1966 when Sherry Joe Bates was murdered. But how many guys had all of it? See where I'm going? So that's the answer to those questions. Yeah, a lot of people could do this, but how many people could do this, and that? Okay, Don had it all, and then couple in Arthur Lee Allen, and you got the winning combo. But anyway, he goes on, probably spent a lot of time at a shooting range, and then he also says, easily recognized car brands. So, that's kind of lining up back with Michael Cole with the whole car deal. It says, organized, detailed, good memory, and spatial skills. Knowledge of electronics and able to construct devices. New bomb making. May have been mildly dyslexic. I have no idea if Don was dyslexic. So at the end where Korsgaard lists a lot of his attributes and things that he thinks the Zodiac Killer would have, he says that, now quote, the Zodiac, quote, most likely had a position in the military, engineering type person, perhaps a mechanic. Well, gee, how about a mechanical engineer that had been in the military? So you see, it's not just Cole's book. These are guys that have really dug into what they think the Zodiac should have, and Don just lines up so well with it all. And just looping back to the one statement by Korsgaard in his book where he said the Zodiac was a pathological liar, that reminds me, when I was first interviewed by Michael Butterfield, he had read my book, and I thought that was great. And Butterfield said that it's very factual, unlike a lot of other Zodiac books. That's great. I mean, I was nervous being interviewed by Butterfield. He's a top expert at the Zodiac case. So I was like, this guy had talked to Don Cheney on the phone. He didn't meet him in person like Tom Voight did, but Michael Butterfield talked to Don Cheney. Obviously, he was still alive. Talked to him by phone twice, and I remember Michael Butterfield telling me that Don would tell him these crazy things. I mean, one, I can't remember verbatim what Butterfield said, but he said he was telling him about the Sears Tower was going to get blown up or something kind of like 9/11, but involved the Sears Tower in Chicago or something. Just really weird stuff, and how much of a liar that Don was. Like, he would tell these whopping huge lies, and I think he also told some to Tom Voight. I don't know what those were. I never talked to Tom Voight, but Michael Butterfield told me that when he talked to Cheney on the phone a couple times, that Cheney would just throw out these crazy lies. I mean, just out of nowhere. So he definitely fits the liar category. I mean, it doesn't mean he's not guilty of anything. It just means the guy would lie. I mean, maybe he felt insecure about certain things, or that was just part of his personality. He was a huge liar. But the people that were closest to him back in the time, like, of course, Sandy Panzarella, would say, oh, I think Don is honest. I don't think he would make up this story about Arthur Lee Allen. And Ron Allen and Karen Allen kind of said the same thing. They never thought that that Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac Killer. Robert Graysmith will tell you otherwise, but we found out that's not true. But they did believe that Don was pretty honest. I mean, so there's three people right there that knew Don Cheney pretty well and vouched that he was credible, but yet he's telling Michael Butterfield big lies, and obviously it looked like he was telling Tom Voigt some lies. We know that Don lied between the interview that Tom Voigt did with him versus what he said on the His Name Was Arthur Lee Allen video, where he told Tom Voigt that he'd never heard of Blue Rock Springs Park. Then in the His Name Was Arthur Lee Allen video, he's specifically telling the story of how Arthur Lee Allen took him to Blue Rock Springs Park, that we've been through all this before, of course. But why didn't Karen Allen and Ron Allen and Sandy Panzarella, why did they think that Don Cheney was honest? Well, because they were being manipulated. It's that simple. So that's all I have for this episode of the Zodcast. I think I made a mistake earlier. I said that it was actually Lady Doom that spins the Wheel of Death, and Tim Holt was playing the character of Red Mask. That's why the Tim Holt character in the comic book is wearing the red mask, but it's actually Lady Doom that spins the Wheel of Death, or the Death Wheel. I think I've seen both. And remember to always go check out Ned over at Black Box Online Radio. He's got a great new upload about the murder of Nikki Benedict. I think I've got that name right. Very interesting murder that could be Zodiac related. So check that out over on Black Box Online Radio. And remember to subscribe to this channel and that channel. And have a great year. Thanks.